Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and all the dignitaries present here for Second International Procurement Conference 2022. This conference is organized by Institute of Supply and Management India and Public Procurement Professional Association of India with support from the World Bank. I'm really privileged to have the pleasant task of welcoming the distinguished gathering for the conference. As a moderator, I, Payal Madan, along with my other team members, would like to welcome you all. So today's will focus on transforming procurement into value-based function and green procurement. And before we begin, just a little housekeeping for you all. As a moderator, I will be monitoring the time. I will also be monitoring the QA and chats. If you have any questions for the presentation, please type it in the chat window. I will help convey the questions to the presenter. General comments and reflection on the presentation can also be typed in the chat. Session, handouts, related materials, and resources we will share with you all after the conference. Now let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Krishnan Batra, President and CEO of ISM-INDIA. I will do a brief introduction and then the floor will be, given to him. Mr. Krishnan Batra has a diverse and global experience of 4 decades in the field of technology and supply management. He enjoys engaging people in sustainable, transform, and inspiring business excellence. He has last assignment with UN organization as a chairperson of supply chain. He was instrumental in re-engineering business process and implementation of ERP worldwide. He started his career with Tata Group after completing his MTech from IIT Delhi. Later, he completed MBA from Syracuse University in USA. Mr. Batra has worked in Switzerland, Denmark, and USA in different capacity. He's a founder of United Nations Standard Codes and Services, which is global standard of coding goods and services. He has worked in many organizations to optimize supply chain and build their professional capacity. Now, I pass you over to Mr. Krishnan Batra to begin. Mr. Krishnan Batra, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Payal, and many thanks for your kind words. So let me start welcoming, firstly, good morning, everyone. On behalf of ISM India and PBPI, I'm very delighted to welcome you all, to all the participants to this conference on future-proofing procurement. In short, I would say when I say future-proofing, I'm talking of a core strategy to make procurement a competitive function and remain sustainable in the years to come. As you know, we hear a lot of disruption all the time. My special thanks to all the speakers from various parts of the world who are sparing their time, valuable time to be with us. So, and they'll be sharing all the insights, what they have in these 2 areas around. And I'm also honored, I would say, to have Mr. Vinay Sharma, who is basically the founder for PPPI, if I had to say. He has been, he has a very diverse experience. I'll be explaining it a little further later. But he is the man who is behind this when I talk of PPI. So without that, PPI would have been incomplete. Now, this conference is being organized to celebrate the 2nd anniversary, I would say, of PPPI, which was set up on 24 September 2020. And the players who are behind it, the stakeholders, the World Bank is one, as I said to you. Mr. Vinay Sharma was a key person. Then ADB, Asian Development Bank, NDB, AIB, ITC Geneva, which is a part of the UN organization. So these organizations played a very active role in launching this Public Procurement Professional Association of India. And this is the first one in India. And so far we have around in 2 years, we have around 6,000 members. And we have got a wide range of activity under PPI. So with this now, let me switch over to the next thing is introducing saying a few words about PPI before I introduce Mr. Vinay Sharma. What is PPI? The PPI is basically, as explained to you, is the first public association of public procurement. It aims at developing, supporting, and promoting the public procurement professionals. On the private sector, we have many. Like if I see around ISM India, SIPs, all those you know very well. ISM India is the oldest one, set up in 1915. So they cover both public and private sector, but PPI is purely focusing on public sector. The vision I have given around the mission of this one is our mission is to develop, support, and promote public procurement professionals. Let me introduce Mr. Vinay Sharma, who is going to be our keynote speaker for today's. Mr. Vinay Sharma has 30 years of experience at the senior leadership position in all the areas around policy formations, managements around developing strategic alliances, implementing reforms in public procurement. The key reform, if I look around from my dealing with the World Bank for so many years, was Procurement Framework 2016. In the past, we all have seen public procurement was only Green Book and the Red Book. One size for all. But I think the credit goes to Mr. Vinay Sharma for launching it and pushing it up in different countries around. It ensures flexibility in public procurement. So public procurement, when we talk of movement from tactical to reactive functions to strategic function, I think that's the key thing around. So he has been with us for the global director of the World Bank, based in, again, Washington, for the last 7 years. And before that, for 14 years, he worked with the World Bank, African Development Bank, as a director, again, of procurement and other activities around. He dealt with procurement, he dealt with financial management and anti-corruption activities in those AFB. So he has been at a very senior positions in all these areas around and brought many changes as well. So before that also, I will not miss it because he was the head of operation and management in Delhi Metro. If I talk of a metro's activities in India, Delhi Metro ranks the number one. And he has been instrumental in that as a head of operations. So with this, again, I want to thank Mr. Vinay Sharma for joining us. Mr. Vinay Sharma is going to talk about his keynote address. Is going to be on value-based procurement. So with this, I give the floor to Mr. Vinay Sharma. Please, Mr. Vinay Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Batra. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to thank the ISM-INDIA and the Public Procurement Professionals Association of India for organizing this, and to Mr. Krishan Batra particularly for playing such an important role in professionalizing the public procurement function in India. I have known Mr. Batra now for 15 years, and I've always been impressed with his energy, with his drive, and his commitment to the profession. I am overwhelmed and I am privileged that I have been asked to speak on a subject that is very dear to my heart today. While the topic of the conference is decidedly vast, I am going to confine myself to public procurement and whether a paradigm shift is necessary in the way we look at public procurement across the world. I seek your indulgence. So can I have the next slide, please? Can I have the presentation, please? Yes. So the title of my presentation is basically whether we can reimagine public procurement and strengthen it to make it more people-centered and sustainable. So the way we are going to talk about today's presentation is to divide it into three broad parts. So initially, I'm going to talk a little bit about the global landscape and the challenges that the world is seeing today. And then we are going to examine whether public procurement can be a true part of the solution. Finally, I'm also going to talk a little bit about a global coalition which is being spearheaded by the World Bank that is attempting to build a global coalition to make public procurement a part of the solution as we speak. Can we have the next slide, please? So can we have the next slide, please? Yeah. Now, public procurement is big business. By all accounts, public procurement is over $12 trillion some say over $13 trillion. And while it varies from country to country, it is reasonably, in almost all areas, it's reasonably between 10 to 20% of the GDP in most countries. Of every $7 that is spent on economic activities, $1 is being spent on public procurement. In many countries, it's the largest economic activity of the state. In some cases, it is even higher than the taxes collected. It's sometimes higher than the salaries that are being paid, the wage bill of the countries, and therefore it is big business. But it is incredibly complex also. It is multi-layered, multi-dimensional, and it is prone to a lot of wastages. As a matter of fact, of the foreign bribery cases that were registered in OECD in a 10-year period, over half of them related to procurement. So we know that public procurement has, while it's a tremendous economic tool, it also has its own challenges. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, infrastructure spending, for example, and I'm just taking this as an example, this would apply to the soft sectors, it would apply to social sectors, to other sectors as well. But there was a study that found that a lot of waste takes place across the world, even in developing countries that have, the checks and balances, the standards, the institutions that are in place. Even there, they found that 15% of the total spend on infrastructure was wasted either because of bureaucratic inefficiencies or because of active corruption. And this number actually went up to more than 50%, almost 53% for low-income countries, with about one-third for the emerging economies. Almost one-third of this expenditure is being lost either to wastage, inefficiencies in bureaucratic processes, or sometimes to active corruption. So we can imagine the potential there is to have public procurement play a very important role in the development agenda. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, we know that the trust in the governments is coming down. We know that the governments have been asked to, they have already taxed a lot of countries have reached the optimum level of taxation. They cannot really tax more. At the same time, so the fiscal space is shrinking. The amount of money that is collected through taxes and the amount of money that they have to spend on welfare schemes, on infrastructure, and so on, is enormous. So there is clearly a shrinking fiscal space. Now, public procurement, with its enormous volumes, cannot be immune to this. It needs to step up for greater efficiency and effectiveness. And this is the term. Effectiveness is the term that we are going to be seeing. We are going to be hearing a little more during the presentation that I'll be making. We see three visible trends. I mean, and these trends are they have been visible for many years now. First, there is a focus on value for money, and we are going to be coming to what we mean by value for money in public procurement. There is now also an increased focus on mainstreaming of collateral procurement policy objectives, collateral which are transversal, which go beyond the normal transactional benefits. And then third, the significant use of technology for better service delivery. And we are going to examine each one of them in some detail in the coming slides. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, McKinsey actually came out in 2018 with what I thought was a very readable and an extremely important report. They tried to find which sector has potentials for procurement savings. And through evidence-based research, through rigorous modeling, they found that the public sector had almost 28% potential. I mean, on the total volume of public procurement, there was a potential of 28% savings. The saving potential was almost 28%, far higher than the other sectors. And they felt that if the best practices are created, then these well-established practices can help save billions, hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars without affecting services. So it's not because that the services are going to be impacted. And this is important, 28%. Please remember this, ladies and gentlemen. This seems to sort of agree with the other figure that was established by OECD and independently by the UN as well, that between 10% to 25% of the total public procurement spend is lost on active wastage, which is corruption, and almost an equal number is lost on inefficiencies. So we are really talking about an enormous amount of money that is there for the asking. Can we have the next slide, please? So McKinsey calls it the 3.5 trillion productivity opportunity. So this is the opportunity that we are losing. And if you see the optimization of public procurement, the x-axis is the disruptive effect on economic recovery, and the y-axis is the time for impact. And the third quadrant, which is of course the most important quadrant, is where the optimization of procurement lies. So the potential for savings is $3.5 trillion, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is equivalent to the cumulative public fiscal gap, which was projected by the IMF for the world in 2021. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, what are the most critical ways public procurement can promote economic growth and development effectiveness? So, and this is, I think, where we need to reimagine our views on public procurement. So we need to understand value for money, and value for money is actually a conceptual construct. It is, generally said that value for money is trying to use, trying to quantify things that have traditionally not been quantified earlier: the operations and maintenance cost, the costs that are during the life cycle of the project, and so on. And in some cases, also trying to quantify things that are not easily quantifiable, the social benefits, for example, the environmental the environmental benefits, and so on. We have to remember, however, that the value for money is not a constant, that it has to depend on the national context. It has to be driven by the national context. So if there is a country that has, for example, issues of joblessness, then any procurement that is going to help create jobs there is going to bring value. A country that has climate change as an important part of or is being affected by climate change will have environmental considerations as an important part of the value. And therefore, value for money is actually defined in terms of 4 critical dimensions. And these are economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. These 3 dimensions have been used to define value for money for a very long time. A 4th dimension, which is equity, which is fairness, which is transparency, and all that, which straddles all these 3, economy, efficiency, and effectivity, has also, most of the countries, most of the organizations have started accepting this also as a 4th critical dimension. As I said, for a country's procurement system to be effective, it has to be driven by its own national regulatory and its own national aspirations. And the economy, efficiency, and effectiveness have to be calibrated relative to the country's own balance and focus on these essential elements. So let us try and understand this a little more. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, as you know, when we talked about the value for money, and we said economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Now, economy and efficiency is something that we have been doing for a very long time. Okay, economy is the use of resources, is the optimal use of resources to define a particular output. Efficiency is using getting the maximum out of those resources. So economy and efficiency are essentially transaction related. These are essentially internal or intrinsic components of any procurement activity. What we are now moving towards is effectiveness. Effectiveness talks about externalities, things that are not intrinsically a part of the procurement agenda, and that is why it's of so critical importance to the public sector, because externalities are important for society. They can be positive externalities, they could be negative externalities. You could have a procurement that ultimately leads to destruction of the climate. You could have a procurement that could lead to creation of better jobs or better society or fairer wages or greater equity or reduced inequality and so on. And therefore, the effectiveness is an external positive or negative uh, externalities, and that has socioeconomic or environmental focus. Now, for many of us who have been, in the business of development, we try to look at things using the results framework, which is, any activity has to have an input which goes towards an output, and then the outcome, results, and impact. In that respect, economy is an input, efficiency is an output, but effectiveness is what is outcome, results, and impact. And it's incredibly difficult to measure. It is incredibly difficult to work on this. But this is, if we want to have a seat on the table of development debates, then we'll have to be thinking about how effectiveness can become the critical part of our discussions. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, this is trying to say the same thing schematically. In the interest of time, because I see that that I have that I need to finish in the next 7 or 8 minutes. Let me skip this and go to the next slide. Now, by this time, I am sure you would have got the drift. Effectiveness is at the heart of social value. If public procurement can provide at least a part of a solution to the problems of today, to joblessness in a country where joblessness is an issue, or to reduce carbon footprint in a country where climate change is an issue, or provide a more equitable distribution of wealth in a country where inequality is a big issue, that is certainly going to help the development agenda. The problem is that while the solutions appear to be relatively straightforward, and we have been hearing about those solutions for a very long time, provide for preferences, provide for set-asides, provide for reservations, and so on and so forth. It is, these are the easy ways of doing this. The more difficult way is to objectively measure impact. This would require calculating the externalities with a degree of accuracy, differentiating between causation and correlation, whether some output is happening because of something, or this output is happening because it is moving in the same direction. So differentiating between causation and correlation, and developing models that would measure these with sufficient accuracy and that are going to ultimately provide credibility to the work that we are doing. Also, we have to understand that for all of this to happen within the confines of the commitments of the country, because we have to work within boundaries, and those boundaries are the legal framework or the international treaties that the country might have signed, trade treaties, for example, WTO treaties, and so on. So while all of this is important, we have to recognize our boundaries as well. Can we have the next slide, please? Now, this is, while I was talking about effectiveness and all that, please don't get me wrong. It's not that I do not believe that efficiency, transactional efficiency and all that are not important. We know that transactional efficiencies are important. Technology is a big boon to businesses as it is to the governments today. And I am happy that more and more countries are embracing, electronic government procurement. And while it is increasing rapidly, it is also having a huge positive impact in the amount of information that we are getting. So technology allows for, wider, better transparency, better accountability, for example. And if the procurement system can be connected to the other systems of the countries, the tax systems, for example, the company registers, for example, beneficial ownership information, etc., it can provide us with the amount of information that would help us rework policy changes that are certainly needed in this area. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yes. Now, at the beginning of the presentation, you would have heard me talk about a global coalition that the World Bank is trying to build up. Now, So this coalition will try and hopefully try and answer some of the very difficult questions that I have posed. As a part of this work, the World Bank commissioned a study which was led by the World Bank itself, but it involved three thought leaders in public procurement, and they worked for many months before they came out with the report. The report is available on the website of the World Bank, and the recommendations by the report include those mentioned in this slide. The limitation of time would not allow me to delve into each of them in any detail, but I would urge all of you to read the report. It's a summary report. The main report is not yet out, but the summary report itself is not a very long report, but it's a report which is very rich in its content. The detailed report also hopefully will be out sometime later this year. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, this brings me to the central question that I posed at the beginning of the presentation, and that is, we have two choices. Okay, we have a choice which is that we continue doing the same with incremental changes in the way we have been functioning. Better transactional efficiencies, time efficiencies, better methods, greater transparency, and so on. So what many would like to say is using the same wine, but perhaps a different bottle. Or we have a choice of a meaningful change while redefining the paradigm itself. So I must say that the first model has actually worked so far quite well, and it has achieved a level of maturity and stability. And the donors are fairly happy with this. But this skirts a fundamental question about the asymmetry between the expectations and the aspirations of the donors and the beneficiaries themselves. So the change in the paradigm where efficiency improvements are necessary, but the drivers of policy change are the countries or the communities or the states' own policy framework and its own aspirations. It has, and these have to have a broad consensus. I mean, you cannot have an aspiration which is not owned by the country. In this model, which is decidedly far more complex, far more difficult, it is difficult to conceptualize, to implement, to run, to monitor. The effectiveness and equity become the overriding drivers of public procurement. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, this will also lead to a slightly different delivery model. I mean, I think that the basic is the same. Yes, yeah, I will talk about the economy and efficiency a little later. I just saw that. But so the model here we are talking about the evidence which is to initiate reform. I mean, so we are right now saying that the reforms have to be initiated through evidence. Okay, where meaningful and deep diagnostics. I mean, we are really not talking only about the diagnostics for the economy and the efficiency part, which is the transactional part, is important. The institutional framework, the legislative framework, the capacity, how the separation of responsibilities, all of that is important. But we are really talking about diagnostics, which goes beyond this. The political economy of the country, for example. And the implementation will need to be constantly monitored. So once you have done the diagnostics, you can identify areas where reforms are necessary, use these to do the implementation, and then the implementation has to be done, and the global standards and evidence are thus created, and so on. Ladies and gentlemen, I see that I have just reached the end of my presentation. I'll just seek your indulgence for a couple of minutes more. So can we go to the next slide, please? What this could achieve, of course, would be sustainable benefits apart from the fiscal savings. We are talking about fiscal savings, which are essentially driven by economy and efficiency. There would also be contribution towards the equitable economic growth. Better job opportunities, expansion of the supply market. We can have environmental sustainability, and finally the development outcomes. Through better procurement planning and quality being important issues, and as I said, moving towards a paradigm that takes the national aspirations at the center of the procurement agenda. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, we have covered this slide a little bit in the past, so in the interest of time, I'd move on because this is it's there. So yeah, so let us. So what is it that we are trying to achieve through this model? A seat on the table for procurement to be seen as a genuine tool for development. Procurement that contributes in a meaningful way to the challenges of today. Procurement that helps in creating jobs, equity, environmental sustainability, a better, fairer society. The list is endless. Can we go to the next slide, please? So now we have mentioned this in passing, but I think this deserves a slightly more detailed treatment. Greater use of technology has made available vast source of credible data, and we mentioned this in the past. Is it possible to marry this with the data received from other sources as well through a much more rigorous analysis, taxes, and beneficial ownership information? The model that is being used at the World Bank is to generate information from data. So the data is inert. So the data is used to generate information. The information is used to generate evidence, and then the evidence is used to generate capacity. And the capacity here is much beyond what we sort of typically look at capacity. Here we are talking about capacity that ultimately helps in development of the country's own agenda itself. The supplier capacity, the capacity of the industry itself. The capacity to make changes in policies that are more in keeping with the aspirations, with the needs of the countries, and so on. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this brings us to the coalition, which we call the Global Procurement Partnership. The Global Procurement Partnership, you could use it a different name. Now, this is this for procurement to play a more meaningful role in the development debates. We have to work together. All of us have to work together. And what does it mean? It includes all of us. It includes the MTBs, it includes the bilaterals, it includes the UN agencies, it includes all other donors, it includes the academics, the researchers, the policy enthusiasts, the monitoring and evaluation experts, the CSOs, the foundations, and the countries themselves. I mean, we have to bring in, if we want to build standards that can be used across the world, then we have to work together. A global coalition is therefore an imperative. This alone will help us identify the areas where interventions are needed and allow us to be self-critical, to pat ourselves on the back when we succeed, and to brace ourselves when we encounter challenges and failures. A global procurement partnership is a need of the hour. Can we go to the next slide, please? In the next slide, please. Yeah, I'm sorry. So in my discussions with many of you, I have found huge support for this idea. It is now time that we bring this to reality now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Vinay Sharma. Your thought-provoking address set a perfect platform for our speakers to deliver their sessions today. We have received a couple of questions you may like to answer. The first one is how the role of public procurement professional is different from supply chain professional.
Okay, so this is the difference sometimes is more theoretical than practical. Yeah, supply chain is by and large it encompasses things that go beyond procurement, beyond traditional procurement, which is purchasing, which includes the logistics, the supplies, the warehousing, and so on and so forth. It applies. I mean, it applies to all parts of procurement, but it is particularly used in the normal revenue kind of procurement. And it is a great deal of work. A very rigorous models have been done, have been produced in the supply chain industry. Public procurement, in this particular case, we are talking about not only procurement for the normal operations needs of the country, but also for large capital projects, which are in many countries they are in volume even bigger than those. We are really talking about an agenda which is policy driven, and where frankly a lot of work needs to be done. Supply chain, I think, has achieved a certain amount of maturity.
Thank you, sir. Second question for you is, can you please help in differentiating between economy and efficiency?
Yeah, so economy is actually an input function. So economy, what it means is, in the most traditional sense, it is using the least resources for a given output. Okay, so for example, if something can be done using X amount, then X plus delta amount, delta X is not really be very economic. And it could be in terms of time, it could be in terms of money, it could be in terms of raw materials and all that. Efficiency is on the other side, that you already have resources and you are trying to see what is the maximum that you can get out of those resources. Okay, so in some ways they are of course related. So efficiency is getting the maximum out of resources, and economy is trying to use the minimum amount of resources in the most traditional sense. Of course, the way we look at it is much wider than this.
Sir, I would like to take the third question. How are you ensuring value addition in World Bank and its branches?
This is, of course, I think it's for any organization, this is something which is always a work in progress. I mean, we have, I would like to believe we have some of the best professionals in the world in the procurement department. They're working in the and there is this constant interaction that takes place through technical seminars and so on and so forth. They are working with the other MDBs, and so the value addition within the World Bank is important. But I think what is even more important is the value addition that the World Bank brings to the countries, and that I think is something that is being done through these amazing 230 professionals, and working with the other MDBs, with the other donors, bilaterals, UN agencies, and so on, to essentially trying and understand these kind of questions that I just posed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sparing time for this workshop.
Thank you very much, Payal, and thank you for all the organizers. I'm sorry that I actually exceeded my time, but I thought that this was the right platform for this the presentation. Thank you again
Sir, it was
for
pleasure
listening.
listening to you. Thank you, sir.